Good, man. How are you today? Oh, it's face wrap. What's wrong? Come on in. They're always wrong. He's like, yeah, they can start there.
Yeah. Got it. Yeah. Okay. Good evening. It's 7 o'clock on March 2nd, and this is the start of the regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission for the County of Goochland. Madam Secretary, do we have a quorum, please?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. I'd like everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invective. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Gracious God, thank you for our men and women in uniform who make it possible for us to meet here safely. Bless and keep those who still do. Thank you for this time to gather to take care of county business. We pray that you grant each of us wisdom to be good stewards of this community. Please be with each person here and give them guidance. Be with each of us as we travel back home. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Bless you.
Gentlemen, review of minutes from the last meeting. Do we have any questions, discussion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion's approved for minutes from last month's meeting. I'm going to open the floor up to a citizen comment. Anybody who'd like to come up and speak, but not about anything pertaining to tonight's agenda? Okay. Close the citizen comment. We've got a change in the lineup here tonight for our cases, and we are going to go with the application by Luckstone first.
Yes, sir. First item is District 4, CU 2023-1, application by Luckstone Corporation requesting a conditional use permit for asphalt mixing plant on an 11.27 acre portion of 137.386 acres at 2115 Ashland Road on tax map numbers 481-010A and 481-047-0. The property is zoned Industrial General M2. The conditional use permit is required by County Zoning Ordinance, Section 15272. The comprehensive plan designates this area as industrial.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Members of the Commission, Tom Coleman, Principal Planner. As Ms. Parker said, this is a conditional use permit for an asphalt mixing plant. The subject property is zoned industrially, and the abutting properties to the east, west, and south share that industrial zoning. There's some agricultural zoning to the north. I just did want to point out, I sort of put in a hashed in on the map. This conditional use permit only applies to the asphalt facility, which is just a portion of the two parcels. The subject property is recommended for industrial in the comprehensive plan, and all the properties in this area along Ashland Road are recommended either for industrial or for that flexible use in the comprehensive plan. And looking at the aerial photo sort of exhibits the industrial nature of the area, including the quarries and most of the buildings that show up on the aerial photo or some type related to industry. Quick summary of the site. Luck Quarries had the property rezoned to the M2 industrial zoning in 1976. The asphalt mixing plant has been in operation since the 1970s. Due to zoning ordinance changes over the years, the facility is currently recognized as sort of a legal non-conforming use or grandfathered use. The applicant is requesting approval of the CUP to bring the facilities and bring the site into compliance with the zoning ordinance. The applicant is not proposing any changes with this application. Just to highlight, there's a variety of buildings and structures that are located on the site, and we'll skip over the conceptual plan. You'll see that there are a number of buildings and facilities on the site. The site does not have direct access to Ashland Road. It does share access with operations to the east or south. I've superimposed that green dashed line. That's not part of the conceptual plan. When we get to the recommended conditions for the CUP, it is to preserve the existing trees that are within that serve as a buffer for the site, and that's just to sort of highlight where that buffer is located. There was a community meeting held in January. There were about 15 attendees. That included Commissioners Brewer and Patuck. A number of employees, some LUC companies and affiliated companies were there, and I believe it was 3 residents were there also. There was one question about off-site facility, but there really were no questions or concern expressed about this application. Just a few conditions that staff is recommending to the Commission. The first would be that the asphalt mixing plant allowed to be operated on the property. The second one would commit to that conceptual plan that I showed you earlier. The third one relates to that buffer that I highlighted on the conceptual plan. It just states that they shall retain and maintain the trees that are in that buffer. And then that last one is our standard condition that relates to the sale or lease of the property. And that concludes my presentation. Be happy to answer any questions.
No changes, we're just renewing.
Correct. Well,
Thank you.
no changes, correct.
We may remove. Would the applicant like to speak?
Good evening. My name is Vic Murthy. I'm with LUC Companies representing Luckstone. Thank you for your time, and thank you for staff for guiding through the process to get to this place for the CUP. Staff's done a great job presenting it, so I don't have a formal presentation, so I'm just here for any questions if you have any.
Nope.
Okay, thank you.
Gentlemen,
Public hearing?
I'm sorry. Would anybody else like to speak? Come forward, please. Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Now, I don't have any questions.
I attended the meeting with you. I'll make a motion to recommend approval as presented.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion is passed.
The motion to recommend approval passes on a 4-0 vote. This case will be heard before the Board of Supervisors on April 18th, 2023, with a recommendation of approval from the Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Our next item tonight is District 3, RZ 2023-1, application by I-64 Industrial LLC, requesting a rezoning of 39.8 acres from Agricultural Limited A2 to Industrial General M2, with proffered conditions located on Pony Farm Road, approximately 650 feet northwest of its intersection with Oilville Road, on tax map number 331050. The comprehensive plan designates this area as industrial.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Members of the Commission, I'm Jamie Sherry, Director of Community Development. For this application this evening, there are revised proffers that would require a waiver of the time limit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be presenting this application to include those changes, and then at the end you can vote if you want to waive the time limits and then take action on the application itself. So as Ms. Parker said, our first it's our second public hearing, is an application by I-64 Industrial LLC. This is a request for a rezoning to create an industrial park. The industrial park will be partially located in Goochland County and partially located in Hanover County. It's approximately 40 acres on the Goochland side, and it's located on Pony Farm Road. As you can see on the map, where the location is in Oilville, in the Oilville district. The property and most of the surrounding properties around it are identified in the comprehensive plan for industrial. So you've got the subject property in red. That's only the property in the county. The other portion of the property, which is in Hanover, will not be shown on any of my slides. The property is zoned agricultural limited. The surrounding properties around it are agricultural limited to the west. To the south, you have an M1 industrial piece of property that was actually zoned when the original zoning maps were created. So that is has been here since 1969. Directly to the east, there is a residential property that is zoned agricultural limited. And right behind the sticker that says I-64 Industrial LLC is the border that is adjacent to Oilville Business Park. So here is the aerial of the property. Here is the Oilville Business Park. There's a residence that is at this property, and all that property belongs to them. The industrial piece that I mentioned is currently vacant. To the west, there are some residential lots, and then again, here is Hanover County, and I believe that is all agricultural and farmland on that side. So what the applicant is proposing is to construct a 14-lot industrial park. As I mentioned, it's in both counties. In Goochland, we will have 9 lots are being proposed and 5 in Hanover County. They have an application currently in Hanover County, and it is running concurrently, not exactly concurrently, but they have made application there as well. The applicant has provided proffers that aim to minimize the impact on surrounding properties. They did proffer a right turn lane, but it should be noted that they are requesting a left lane turn waiver. This is the conceptual plan that was proffered. I did mark up and the color pieces just for a little bit more clarity. The county line is that blue line that runs down the middle of the subdivision. Goochland is obviously on the side that it connects to Pony Farm Road. The property would be utilized by a cul-de-sac that would go through the county and then into Hanover. The applicant is right there. The applicant exceeded the requirement of the district, which is 30 feet, so they are proffering common open space where the stormwater retention ponds are, as well along the open space that is the buffer. The applicant has provided a proffer stating that those lands will be maintained and controlled by the business association that will be formed as part of this subdivision. So the comprehensive plan does designate this piece of property as industrial, so it is consistent with that. Deeper into the comprehensive plan, it does give specific strategies that should be looked at when developing industrial property. The direct development to designated growth areas or I-64 interchange, which this is. It should support local business development and expansion, which this does. Promote high-quality architectural site designs that are comparable with the area. The overlay district will have those requirements on those front 2 lots, but there is no commitment to have that same exact appearance or same materials used. Encourage the proliferation of signs. Through the overlay district, they would be allowed 1 mounted sign, and it would have to meet those overlay standards. I don't know anything about any of they would just have to meet the regular ordinance required for the interior ones as it's presented. Ensure compatibility with neighborhood uses, noise, screening, lighting, things along those lines. As we go through the rest of the presentation, I will call out some of the things that they have done to support this strategy, some that could possibly be improved. And connectivity between uses, typically that is encouraged in an industrial park, but there are, with the exception of the industrial park that's already constructed, the other parcels are not zoned that way, and there's no indication that they will become industrial at this point in time, so those are not a requirement. So the proffers that are in front of you, the changes are essentially that the applicant has added a prohibition of retail as a primary use among all the other uses that have been prohibited. And they have revised the conceptual plan, mostly showing things along the lines of where the common area, kind of some clarification that the one that went out in the packet, and it does actually call out the easements, which does connect back to the maintenance of those areas. Other proffers include a conceptual plan, which I just showed you, limitation on building height. They have proffered to limit building height at 35 feet. Screening of all outside storage, that would be any primary uses that are outside storage or any outside storage associated with a building, business rather. They are proposing to, or they're proffering to limit to 3 lots that have their primary use as outside storage, which is allowed in the M2 zoning district by right, but they're limiting it to 3. I had mentioned the 50-foot buffer on the eastern and western sides of the property. The code is 30, as I'd mentioned, so it's above that. They are proffering a right turn lane. Along with this, within the proffers, they are requesting to waive the left turn lane requirements. And then I had mentioned the property owners association that will maintain the open space and landscaping and stormwater ponds. They've also limited a number of the uses within the M2 and M1 zoning district because M1 is allowed in M2. So I'm going to read through those quickly. Airport, animal shelter, asphalt concrete mixing plant, car wash, composting facility, a restaurant, a debris landfill, junk storage, material recovery facility, sand and gravel pit, quarry mining, commercial sawmill, and then on the same bullet, it's a separate use, public assembly, but not including private events otherwise permitted. So if someone was having their own individual private event for their business that wasn't renting for a public use, public assembly use, that would be allowed. Gas stations, petroleum storage, but not to include accessory uses for private fleet fueling, so they would be allowed to have fuel tanks there and fuel up their own fleets. Truck terminal and retail. But this does not, this would be retail as a primary use. This is the use that was just most recently added to the proffers. This would allow, for example, a showroom or, if an automobile place had, maybe some wax that, they were using on a car, and they said, this is a good wax, we sell it, something along those lines, but not someplace you would go specifically to buy an item. It would be, an accessory to a permitted use. And lastly, a kennel. So a little bit about the transportation in this area. The major thoroughfare plan identifies Pony Farm Road as a minor collector road. The minor collector road is what triggers them having to have both the left and the right turn lane. Our ordinance is more restrictive than VDOT requirements, and so per our code, they are required. They are providing a right turn lane, but they are requesting no left turn lane. It should be noted that no left turn lane is warranted per the traffic analysis or VDOT's turn lane warrants. Pony Farm and Oilville's intersection. There was a lot of discussion about this, or there was some discussion about this at the community meeting. Our traffic analysis, the traffic analysis that was submitted with the application did identify the intersection of Oilville Road and Pony Farm Road was that turn lanes were warranted, a left turn lane was warranted based on existing conditions, meaning that without them even coming here, it already had that concern and issue. The traffic impact analysis study actually said that only 20% of the traffic would be coming from north on Pony Farm Road, which is not significant enough for really this to be fallen on one applicant, and it is an off-site improvement. So there was a community meeting held in January. Approximately 20 people were in attendance. We had both Goochland and Hanover residents in attendance. Nobody expressed opposition, but there was lots of concerns. There were some concerns raised. Days of the weeks and hours of operation, potential noise coming from the industrial park, traffic, trucks at the intersection of Pony Farm and Oilville Roads. This is something that, until this TIA was actually, the traffic analysis was done, this was not something that was actually on staff's radar. It had not appeared on any of our list to recommend approval, funding to improve in the future. It is now. There just had not been any development out there in such a long time, and that's generally how we get our traffic analysis unless there's an actual study being done. So that is now on the county's radar for potential funding in the future to add that turn lane. On my presentation, I have staff received 2 emails from citizens. I received 2 more today, so that's a total of 4. One raised specific concerns about permitted uses, and as you can see, I think that individual's concerns were addressed for the permitted uses based on what the applicant has proffered. The other 3 were just opposing the use in general, saying that it's not an appropriate area. It is a residential area more so than it is industrial, and it should continue to be so, and the impact that could potentially bring. So the remaining concerns that are left are directly related back to those strategies within the comprehensive plan, specifically promote high-quality architectural site designs that are compatible with the area. As I mentioned, that front part of the lot is going to be in the overlay district, so that's great, and there's probably an expectation that would continue, but there is nothing to commit to that, so it really, anything could go beyond that. And then ensure compatibility within the neighborhood uses. This application should minimize activity that would impact the normal day-to-day life of the surrounding residents, and they have done that in part by proffering out a lot of the most noxious uses within those zoning districts. But as it is presented today, businesses could operate 24/7. So that was something we wanted to bring to your attention. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. The applicant is also here to answer questions, and I guess we will go through the public hearing, and then you all would make your 2 separate votes, correct?
Okay.
I have one question. It has 3 parts. There's nothing in here on the proffers of hours of operation, lighting, noise, or anything like that. Is that typical of all of our industrial parks?
No, most of our industrial parks, to be honest with you, are 20, 30 years old, some even older. And those proffers, for example, the industrial park directly next door to the Oilville Park, they do not have any limitations on that. And out of sheer luck, I don't think that it has had too much impact.
So we will still require downlighting?
Yeah, it will still have to meet the ordinance requirements.
Got it.
Would have to be dark sky compliant,
Correct, okay.
and signage would have to be consistent with what our ordinance would allow.
And the hours are 24/7?
As of right now, there's no restrictions on that. I'm not sure that that's the intent to have all the businesses run that way, but there's nothing prohibiting that.
The left turn lane would be coming from Pony Farm, not from the Oilville Road side, the other side.
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
And that's what they want, the waiver to not do that.
That's correct.
And traffic says they don't need to?
Both the impact analysis as well as the VDOT's turn lane warrants, both did not trigger that.
Got it. Any other questions? Thank you.
Of course.
Would the applicant like to speak?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Andy Condlin, here on behalf of the applicant. Have with me Todd Walton, Patrick Dolan, and Malachi Mills, who's the civil engineer on the site, will be assisting as well as the questions come up. A lot of what I was going to present was already presented by Ms. Sherry, so I'm not going to rehash. But this is a picture that you can see the Hanover Goochland line and where this property sits within that respect. And also, thought this was important to be able to show the proximity to the existing Oilville Business Park, which I'll refer to again in a little bit. But Oilville Business Park, which was rezoned, has proffers, but does not have any proffers related to the hours of operation. And one of the issues that we have, which I will discuss, is being in a competitive nature in the marketplace for those that are allowed for. Again, most of the businesses in there are the types of businesses exactly what we're going to be providing for and asking and marketing for. It's really a blueprint of what we're proposing for this site as well. We have a couple of slides that really are not worthwhile, including the Hanover County slide. I guess you're not allowed to show anything from Hanover County, but I am, so I can show this a little bit if there's any interest in discussing that. The critical thing that I did want to point out, as Ms. Sherry has provided for, is that you can see the county's comprehensive plan. The long-range plan for the county is for this area to be industrial, and it's been that way for some time. Despite that fact that from an industrial standpoint, we have provided for on our plans, and we've highlighted as what we've submitted some of the changes that are the most recent changes, really to identify specific areas. And these are in response to some of the comments that we received. We did have our community meeting in January, but we've continued to talk with the residents in the area who have provided for, as late as a few days ago, some of the concerns. The one on the retail was provided previously. I just forgot to add it. So that's why I'm asking for that retail prohibition, but for if it's accessory otherwise. But there was a request to show the building setbacks and with respect to the property common areas. And what we provided for is the Property Owners Association will maintain those common areas. We want to be able to provide them either in fee to the association, which a lot of residential do, accomplish it that way, but also with respect to the business, they also allow for easements within the lot itself so that the Owners Association has an easement itself for maintenance of the buffer. And that's really where we fall on, is to be able to provide a larger buffer that has a berm. We're providing for a berm in that area, and it'll bring that up. We actually deleted a lot of the buffer language, the landscaping language, because it's already required by the code, including a double row of plantings along that, within that 50-foot area, but also preserving the existing trees and landscaping. We think that this provides a substantial buffer to the surrounding properties, including those that are in the comp plan for industrial, but it affects the noise, which we have to comply with, so we don't have a proffer on lighting as well and the noise ordinance, but it's in addition the protection that's provided by this buffer. And as you can see, it's 50 feet on the east and west, but also in the rear, it's a substantial RPA area, which is the Hanover County side, but it's a substantial area that's a variable width that's much wider in that area that'll also help with the buffering of the noise and the lighting concerns. We have the VDOT road that comes in on the property. It is going to be built to VDOT standards and will be dedicated to VDOT for state maintenance. And off of that, we have a setback, of course, that is required. Ms. Sherry has provided for a number of the uses and the restrictions. I'm not going to go over those. I was going to flip through those, but at this point, we think that this is appropriate for recommendation to the Board of Supervisors with the revised proffers that we've submitted, which only further restrict and provide protections in the area. We'd ask that you would recommend this to the Board of Supervisors, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have at this point.
What happens if Hanover County changes the buffer requirements or disapproves it?
Hanover County will never go less than what we propose, I can tell you that. Yeah, so I think that would be an issue. The nice thing is we can't develop in Hanover without Goochland. We can develop in Goochland without Hanover. We would just pull that cul-de-sac back. We'd probably have to potentially come back to revise that, but that's literally what would happen at that point. We would just move it, pull the cul-de-sac back and just have those number of lots, those 9 lots that are in Goochland develop, and we wouldn't develop in Hanover. And we'll have to have, it's an entirely different process. It's an entirely different code. So as you're aware, I can't proffer something that's already in the code in that jurisdiction. So our proffers will look slightly different, have the same effect, because there's some requirements that they have in Hanover that are part of their code that you all don't. But at the end of the day, we're about a month behind where Hanover is. We've made application almost the exact same time, probably about 3 days apart, and that they just take a little longer in their process. Right now, I believe we're scheduled for their April meetings. Their meetings tend to be later in the month. Yours are smack dab at the beginning, so I'm hoping to get in front of the Planning Commission in Hanover in April.
Good.
So,
Thank you. Anything else?
excuse me, that's why we wanted to come forward first with Goochland, because Hanover is going to ask the same question. And what happens, and my answer is, if we don't get approved in Goochland, there's no way we can operate or put anything in Hanover. So that's why we want to be a step ahead, is what our plan is, to be a step ahead in Goochland than we are in Hanover.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
I will now open the floor to citizen comment. Anybody who would like to come up and speak their mind, you'll have 3 minutes. Please come up into the microphone, state your name and address. And we have a system of lights at green, yellow, and red, and I hope at around 3 minutes you can kind of bring it to a close when the red light comes on.
Hopefully it won't be that long. Hi,
Okay.
my name is Lee Reese. I own the property on Oilville Manor Court, 1241. We're just building, so we haven't moved there yet. But I am in direct opposition of this project for various reasons, potential, obviously, property devaluation. I was at the previous meeting that was spoke of. There were questions that was mentioned earlier. And through the questions, I hope it was recognized that there's, more people than me that was in opposition of this. I think there is going to be a traffic issue from when you turn from Oilville Road, when you turn left onto Pony Farm Road, because there's that little kind of corner hook that you can't really see traffic coming around that corner that's going to be turning onto Pony Farm Road. It's kind of like a T intersection. I think that is going to be a crux if this goes through, and the amount of traffic that could go through it. So I think that is a major concern. It wasn't so much talked about in the presentation because it's more on the Hanover side. The total 83 acres, the Hanover side is almost 70% woods. They're suggesting ripping all that out. I mean, we need more trees, not less. We need more farmland, not less. Yes, I understand that progress has to happen, but just across the road from Pony Farm Road is a property that is designated for M1 right now. I know it's full of trees, but use that one. So in ripping out all those trees, also that elevates as it goes back to the Turkey Creek. And our properties are behind there, so they tear out all those roads, or all those trees, and they build 35-foot buildings. We're going to be seeing buildings in our backyard. So I'm really concerned. Obviously, we're just in the building process, so this is kind of like a kick in the gut. And I would hope you guys would reconsider, leave the county life and the view of county life the way it should be. There should be an atmosphere of county life. This exit shouldn't be like the Mannequin Sabat Ashland exit, where there is quarries and bigger buildings and businesses. This makes something quaint out of this exit instead of developing it into an industrial park. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Good evening. My name is Dave Mort. I live at 2410 Hamway Drive, which is right off of Pony Farm. Recent residents, but have been in the Richmond area for quite some time. Strongly opposed to this, and actually just found out about it a couple of days ago through a flyer that was left in my mailbox by another concerned citizen. I agree with everything that gentleman just said, and I can't say it any better. So I would hope that you would reconsider this, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Helen Carter, 201 Deer Keep, 23238, and I'm going to give my time to Clay Carter.
Hi, my name's Annie Carter, and I live at 1468 Pony Farm Road, and I would like to request a denial for this application. And I'm going to give my minutes to Clay Carter.
Hi, my name is Clay Carter, and I live at 1468 Pony Farm Road. My property is right between the current business park to the east and the proposed industrial park to the west. I would like to recommend denial for this application for the following reasons. I'll start with the fact that the applicant wants to rely on the 2035 comprehensive plan to get this rezoning pushed through. What they failed to grasp here is that it is a comprehensive plan. It is not a simple two-dimensional paint-by-numbers plan. There are several other factors in the comp plan that need to be looked at and addressed. Two of those clearly delineated factors in the comp plan, specifically in connection with commercial and industrial development, are 1, encourage interconnectivity between uses, 2, ensure adequate utility and transportation infrastructures. First, with respect to connectivity, the applicants have made zero effort to provide any foresight to connectivity. If we're going to follow the comp plan here, then let's follow the comp plan. And that will lead you to note that the current residential parcels to the west and my residential parcel at the corner of Pony Farm and Oilville Road to the east are also designated as purple industrial. It doesn't take a crystal ball to see that at some point in the future, whether that's 10 years, 50 years, who knows. But these residences are most likely going to get squeezed out as this industrial and commercial development expands near the interchange. In accordance with the comp plan, at a minimum, the applicants should set aside a stub road right-of-way to both the east and the west to provide future connectivity of similar uses. These applicants have been unwilling to do that because they are so focused on the dollar signs. They don't care one bit about fundamental community planning considerations. If the comprehensive plan layout were to fall into place in the future, you'd have 3, 4, 5 separate developments, all with dead-end cul-de-sacs. There's no possibility of connecting. This connectivity is essential for safe access as well as reaching the full potential of the area. Second, utility and transportation infrastructure are another specific consideration straight from the comp plan for commercial and industrial development. This is a fundamental safety issue. Pony Farm Road is a heavily traveled road that people from Goochland, Hanover, and Louisa all use heading east to come to 64 at Oilville. And yet the applicants have declared that they think they only need one right turn lane into the development heading west on Pony Farm and don't need a left turn lane for traffic coming from the west. That left turn lane is a code requirement, but the applicant wants to have the requirement waived. Why do they want to have it waived? To save a few bucks at the expense of the community's safety. This is just another example of the applicants having no foresight whatsoever. Pony Farm Road is heavily traveled and it will only get worse. They absolutely need to install the left turn lane. It is simply appalling that they want to have it waived. Without a turn lane, there will certainly be an issue when oncoming traffic encounters a vehicle waiting to turn into the proposed park. Wrecks will happen because of this. This will create significant backups that could be avoided with the implementation of the turn lane. Third issue with this application is the lack of detail given for almost everything. Most of these so-called proffers are required codes. The application is not setting much of a standard for this park. One vague topic is regarding the building size. It's been stated multiple sizes there be a 12,000 square foot capacity. I also received a letter from the applicant's attorney that stated a 17,000 square foot capacity. This was pertaining to Hanover. I don't know where the differentiation gets from that, but when looking at the wording, there is no capacity for building size. The applicant's simply stating they're required to have a fire break every 12,000 square feet. Essentially, they can chain together as many of these as they want. There's no requirement on building size. Another example is the 35-foot height capacity of these buildings. This is already required given the proximity to the residential lots that surround. Hours of operation is another topic that is not being addressed. The applicant's saying that they can limit the operation hours, but they're not stating they will. Residents in the area need some written reassurance that this is not going to be creating some nighttime or weekend activities that are going to create noise, traffic, and other nuisances to the immediate area. If the applicant's not willing to state their intended restrictions, maybe there needs to be a zoning hearing on a lot-by-lot basis to ensure that the intended use fits the area. The next and possibly most important topic that has been dodged is the landscape design for the buffer. The original application pulled the exact description from county zoning for what would be used in the buffer area. Size of trees and shrubs that will be used differed over the course of the last 44 days of discussion of this matter. The revised proffers that were sent out yesterday were the least descriptive that they have been the whole time. With the proximity to the residential area, the fact it's an open field, this needs to be held to a little higher standard, in my opinion, than just what they're trying to get by with. They've also recently added that there will be an owners association with covenants. This is a great idea. It'll hold the tenants to a standard that is necessary to make this possibly work for the area. The main problem is that there's no details included. We don't know if these covenants are simply going to state all owners are required to pay for lawn maintenance in common areas, or if it'll actually have rules to hold the tenants accountable. If this is to be included, there needs to be a standard set for tidy lots, proper screening, replacements of items in the buffer when something dies, etc. I've lived next to the current park for long enough, and I know what will work there. And the problems, they take way too long at this point to get resolved without something like this in place, and it's not fair to the surrounding residents. In conclusion, it is clear the applicant has not properly planned this proposed park or is trying to do the bare minimum for approval. I ask that you please recommend this application for denial based on what has been submitted tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hello, my name is Hall Carter. I live at 1556 Broad Street Road, about 1 mile due south of this project's location. And one of my main concerns, is with the timeline of this application, that the process has just been too rushed all the way through. The timeline so far, community meeting was on January 26th. Then just yesterday at 10:58 a.m., the applicant's attorney emailed out revised proffers, which missed the deadline, according to your commission's bylaws, which state that it's by close of business on the Tuesday before the hearing. This was yesterday, Wednesday. The citizens would only have received yesterday's email from the attorney if they attended the community meeting and wrote down their contact information. And now tonight, the Planning Commission, only 35 days after the initial community meeting. And when I checked the commission's agenda online this morning, the agenda packet does not contain the most recent version of these proffers. So this puts the entire public at a major disadvantage here. The application's been rushed through, I think just hoping people will not pay attention. And of course, when you actually dig into these proffers, several of the items are simple recitations of the code requirements, so they aren't even really actual proffers at all. I think Ms. Sherry did a good job mentioning some of the handful of proffers that are meaningful, but there's still several things lacking, which other people have already hit on. And so even with these relatively weak proffers, the application is still shooting for the more intensive M2 industrial designation. The current business park and the vacant land that was mentioned on the south side of Pony Farm, they're both M1. So why does this applicant need M2 instead of M1? And I thought it'd be helpful for everybody to just read the literal statement of intent from our county's zoning ordinance. For M1, it says, this district is intended to permit certain industries, ones which do not in any way detract from residential desirability, to locate adjacent to residential uses. This district allows lower impact industrial uses with limited outside storage to protect and foster adjacent residential desirability while permitting industries to locate near a labor supply. And now here's the statement of intent for M2, which speaks for itself. It says this district is intended for heavy commercial and industrial operations, which may create some nuisance not properly associated with nor particularly compatible with residential, institutional, and neighborhood commercial service establishments. So just based on what is before you tonight, I'd ask that you please recommend for denial. While the comp plan does note this area as industrial at some point in the future, this specific application just fails on too many fronts that are also part of the comp plan. Things like mitigating effects on the community, ensuring adequate infrastructure, and the safety items that you've heard.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Erin Dawson at 11404 Brickview Lane, and I am in opposition of this. When we bought our home, we liked it quiet and green and peaceful, and we'd like to keep it that way. The other part to this that's already been spoken to tonight is the traffic risk, and I understand a risk has been identified, so increasing the risk would not be advantageous or safe to the residents. It's no surprise or shock to anyone about the traffic coming off of 64. going west onto Oilville Road. And I believe it was about a month ago, there was an accident on the exit ramp that closed it. And all traffic had to go up to Gum Spring to get off of the interstate. So this would only add to all of that in the future. Thank you.
Hi, my name's John Kidd. I also live at Brickview Lane. I think the first gentleman said it best. I agree with everything with regards to we bought this property because we're in the country. We like the quiet. We don't like lights. We don't like the traffic. I would say if you're going to approve this, there's a couple things I would like for you to look at. Obviously, the M2 versus M1, the hours, if we could set something up where that's a 9 to 5 versus a 24/7. And the traffic right now without this is horrific. And everybody talks about Oilville to Pony Farm. That's very bad. We live it every day. But getting off of 64, not only have there been accidents, but if you follow the law and get in the turn lane, you will be, excuse me, you will be in an accident. There's no way around it. So just please keep that in mind if you plan on approving it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Willie Wise, 74 Mannequin Park Drive, Mannequin Sabbath, Virginia. The attorney tonight talked about the buffers on the east side, the west side, and the back of the property. The thing that I'm concerned about is the front of the property where the most exposure is for residents coming down that road. When you come down the road, you're going to see those buildings in there. What I would like to see is a detailed plan on vegetation in the front to cover up some of those buildings in the back. Always look at the, I guess it's the Rockville Mannequin Ramp, which is really hectic at this time. Someday, Oilville may be like that, so I think we need to take, some precautions and make sure we have some vegetation in the front. If you turn the clock ahead 10 or 15 years, that's what you might be looking at. So we have to be careful with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we'll close citizen comment. Applicant like to come up and talk?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief, but I'll go backwards, I think, from what the comments were. Mr. Wise talked about the front of the property. It is a 30-foot buffer, as is required by the standards of the code, but it also, that includes a 20-foot dedication for Pony Farm Road is in front of that, and then the buffer starts, so we're already doing that dedication. Also, with respect to specific landscaping, we're meeting the code requirements. It already specifies what that's specifically providing for, and it's also in the overlay for Oilville, which has architectural requirements, the signage requirements. So our thought is that the very first parts of the buildings as you come in, those two buildings that you come into, they're going to be setting the standard off of Pony Farm Road as people drive by. So not only do you have the 30-foot buffer, you have a widening of the road, the 20-foot dedication, but also the 30-foot buffer, and then you have the architectural standards that are set. We're also provided for in the proffers, the storage uses as well, and screening all of those, whether accessory or not, which is above and beyond what the code requires. So that would additional screening if necessary with respect to anybody that you can see off of Pony Farm Road. With respect to the M1 versus M2, absolutely right with the intent statement, but that is the intent statement and it has specific uses that are permitted. We've gone through the uses. For example, the Oilville Business Park, and I can pull the proffers if you want to. There's just a couple of uses they've taken out, which we've also taken out, that would otherwise be allowed. That's zoned M1. We've provided for numerous other uses, those that we think that are causing nuisances or would cause impact on the residents. We've taken those out completely. I would also, as I pointed out, the 50-foot buffer is providing for a limitation on that as well. With respect to the timeline, these are very simple changes with respect to the revision of the reference to the concept plan, which the only changes were with respect to identifying the common areas because it was hard to read otherwise what was. Ms. Sherry and I had a discussion and a debate as to, is that a common area or is that a property line? So we tried to identify that better in that respect, and the building setback lines as was requested. The other change was a request by a resident with respect to the retail, and that's what we placed in there. So again, those are very minute changes, but they're for the protection and the clarification of what comes forward. With respect to Mr. Carter's list that he had, I'll try to run through theirs. We can't put every detail into the restrictive covenants with respect to the Owners Association. This is a proffer that I use on numerous occasions in numerous jurisdictions. It sets the standards, including the maintenance requirements, including architectural review, and including the common areas, which is very typical. We'll get into the details, but those would have to be reviewed by the county staff to make sure that they're sufficient and to make sure that they're provided. We obviously haven't drafted those at this time, and that's where the detail would come in. We do think that the landscaping, I know there's some frustration with respect to the landscaping, we're not allowed to proffer anything that's otherwise provided in the code. That's the policy of the county. It's reviewed by, which is typical of most counties, it's reviewed by staff and reviewed by the county attorney's office to make sure that they're not identifying exactly. There is some confusion, for example, with respect to the storage area. That would only apply to the part that's in the overlay district in Oilville. I just copied that right out of the ordinance to apply to the entirety of the property, including that which is not in the overlay district. So there is some language that's consistent with or identical, but that doesn't apply to the entirety of the property until we've proffered it, and that's why we've done that. With respect to the hours of operation, we know this is it's a difficult to be able to provide for businesses, and these are small businesses that people are operating out of their homes now and maybe are starting to get employees, want to be able to have a building that be able to have their businesses themselves. And, you know, some people operate earlier in the morning, some people operate later in the day. If you're a landscaping operation and doing snow removal, maybe during that period of time you're operating late at night and cars are coming, your trucks and plows are coming in during the day and during the night as well, depending on what the need for it is. That's why we're trying not to, you know, it's having a hard time identifying what that would be. We're open to the discussion, but I haven't tried to mislead anyone because we haven't proffered it. Specifically, so that, you know, our hours of operation are consistent with what the Oilville Business Park is, and we think that's important for the operation of the business, and we're limited in size. And yes, there are ways to go beyond the proffer. The proffer is very specific that if we want to go beyond the 12,000 square feet, with respect to the 17, that would be in Hanover, and they have to come in from their building code and be able to go through that. We haven't done the proffers yet with the county in Hanover. In Goochland, we do it at the beginning. In Hanover, we do it at the end of the process, right before we go to the Planning Commission, where staff recommends those specific proffers, and that was in our discussion with them. That could very well change, and when we go through the Hanover process, we'll be able to detail that. With respect to lack of detail on the height, we've got a 35-foot height, same as the Oilville Business Park. That's what we provided for in the proffer specifically. With respect to the traffic and the turn lanes, the TIA has been reviewed by the county as well as by VDOT, and we have the VDOT standards. It seems unnecessary to build additional pavement when it's not required. And the numbers and the professionals have looked at it and said specifically the left turn lane is not required. And I know, you know, when we do the widening, that's going to improve it. When we put in the right turn lane, that will improve the traffic in that area for our purposes as well. But the traffic is not going to be coming from that north from Pony Farm Road into the site. The numbers are just not there to justify that left turn lane. And that's why we're asking for the waiver. It's nothing more or less. VDOT has control of that as well, and obviously it's a county standard to have it on every instance, but they do allow for the waiver in that type of situation. And finally, I would just throw out that we have tried to provide for protection of the neighbors with the limitation on our uses. We have provided for the concerns that they've raised, not only with the ordinance that's required, but consistent with other industrial parks. This is an economic development play where they don't have any specific users. Some of these, the gentlemen that are developing have their own small businesses that will want to move into here, and there's a need for it. They see the need for it. We provided for a 50-foot buffer, which is enhanced beyond what otherwise is required, putting in the berm, which raises the landscaping, retaining all the existing areas and existing trees, and it is a farmland at this point. The one thing I didn't mention was about the access. You know, we've located our access point specifically to be able to allow for access on either side of us, east or west of us, for those properties. Those properties aren't zoned currently for industrial uses. We don't want to have a stub road into those uses for and not knowing what's going to be there, if ever, at this point, which would also break on the buffer. We think it's, you know, we meet the standards for VDOT and meet the spacing standards for them to put in their own access, and it's not required otherwise. While they ask for interconnectivity, there's no chance for interconnectivity of other similar zoned property, and that's really what it calls for at that point. So, with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have. We believe we put forth a case that's appropriate for recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, and we'd ask that you do that.
Questions for Mr. Conlon?
Yes.
Yes.
Are you aware of the congestion at peak times at the Oilville Pony Farm interchange?
We've got the traffic study. I don't know, Malachi, if you've got those numbers, but I mean, certainly we know that there is issues at that time. You know, folks talk about trucks, and will be trucks, and there'll be small businesses, but these are not tractor trailers, and yes, we'll be adding to that. We're not adding pursuant to the typical standards, we're not adding that much more to it than it already exists, that the need for, you know, some of those that already exist. But you know, we will create more traffic, there's no doubt at that point.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, gentlemen?
I have some questions for staff.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So, right, stub roads normally on subdivisions for homes, you all request stub roads?
So the way that Mr. Conlon described it is pretty much the same approach that we've been taking. This has been reviewed by VDOT, and they're the first ones to call out a stub road, as we all know. The connectivity to the industrial park was already, there was already a business at that location, and the other properties were farmland, as it is now. I think if it was a residential, maybe perhaps that would be something that would be a subdivision to a subdivision, a commercial use to a commercial use, but it was not something that was warranted through VDOT.
It has been addressed, it's just not necessary, is what you're...
Yeah, I mean, it was something that we discussed, and the conceptual has been brought. We were discussing just when that was brought up that I don't know, but perhaps them going into Hanover County was considered an extension, but I don't know how that would possibly be, because it's a cul-de-sac.
If this is zoned the way they're asking, will each lot have to apply also for CUP?
It depends on what their use is. If they are requesting a use that requires a conditional use permit, they would. Each individual lot would have to go through a plan of development approval, but
We would still have approval on each lot even after this.
approval of anything that would require additional oversight, such as a conditional use permit. But yes, we would oversee everything else, but that would just be whatever is required by the ordinance.
And is the Oilville Industrial Park, it's the M1 now?
I believe it's M2.
M2. But it's old enough that they
I'm sorry.
are, what the limitations on this, with this zoning is identical to what they have in that now?
There are some proffers on that site. I did mention them in the staff report. Let's see if I can remember them all. There is the 50-foot buffer that is required, and it should be noted that when that was developed, there was a full tree stand there, so there was large, already mature trees. So the farmland that is currently being done, there's areas of trees, but the whole thing was, so there would be a lot of plantings that would be required per our ordinance. But if I would like to respond to something that Mr. Conlon said, the proffers that they have, we were doing a lot of work over the last week or so, and the proffers that were noted by one of the citizens that were the least restrictive or the least offering were the ones that came through now. The conversation between me and Mr. Conlon were that we do have ordinance requirements, and what they were offering in addition to that wasn't necessarily, it wasn't working together. So they weren't really offering it in addition to it. They were offering that as their proffer. So I had hoped to have some additional conversations with him about that. So there could be additional landscaping offered.
Gentlemen, Emma Sherry, can you please just go to the zoning maps? There's no confusion. I think the Oilville Business Park is
Thank you.
M1.
Thank you. Oh, it's not noted on there. It's M1 across the street, so yes, that's the same color purple. Forgive me, I got the wrong designation.
I think that's all I have.
Any other questions? Okay. We have 2 votes. We need one to waive the timeline
Turn lane?
for the, right, correct.
I have one
Sorry?
comment, I guess. I know that we had a case on this property not too long ago for a different use, and I know that several of the folks that spoke in opposition of that use said that they would like to see it as an industrial use, but now that seems to be different from what was stated at the previous case for the same plat of land. So,
This was the Elks property, right?
correct,
Yeah.
proposed, yes.
And gentlemen, just one more clarification. The first vote is to waive, to review the revised proffers as you have on the dais. I think, Mr. Duke, I think I heard you say turn lane. But it's the timeline
It's the
of the
information.
proffers. Right,
Correct,
right.
Timeline. Do we have a motion for approval to waive?
we approve the timeline change.
I'll second that. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Approval for the timeline to waive. Secondly, do we have a motion to approve the application?
This is what this area should be used for, is, you know, with in the interstate. I know that there are concerns about it, but I make a motion, we approve it as presented.
I second. All in favor?
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, can we get a roll call vote? Mr. Duke?
Aye?
Mr. Rockacharlie?
No.
Mr. Patek?
Aye.
Mr. Brewer?
Aye.
The motion to recommend approval passes on a 3-1 vote. This case will be heard before the Board of Supervisors April 18th, 2023, with a recommendation of approval from the Planning Commission. Our final item tonight is in District 4, RZ 2023-2, application by Goochland County, Virginia, requesting a rezoning of 5 acres from Industrial Limited M1 with proffered conditions to Business General B1 with proffered conditions at the eastern line of Hockett Road, approximately 900 feet north of the intersection with Tuckahoe Creek Parkway on tax map 5832-353A. The comprehensive plan designates this area as prime economic development.
Can you give it a second before they?
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Parker. Members of the Commission, again, Tom Coleman, Principal Planner. As Ms. Parker said, this is a request to rezone from an industrial zoning to a business zoning with proffers, 5 acres for a new fire rescue station. The subject property and properties generally to the east and south share an industrial zoning. Properties to the north and to the west across Hockett Road include agricultural and residential zonings. Generally, this area, the properties to the west, to the east of Hockett Road are all recommended for prime economic development, and properties to the west of Hockett Road share a single-family residential low-density recommendation. Looking at the aerial photo, sort of reflects the subject property and the properties to the east and south, which are generally recommended for, or generally industrially zoned, are vacant. If you get a little further to this, further to the east, you see the Carmack site. Properties to the north and to the west across Hockett Road reflect single-family residential development. The proposed use is for a new fire rescue station. The proposal is for an approximately 15,000 square foot building. The building would initially include 3 drive-through bays with the potential for a 4th bay, and there would also be a community training room. Reflecting the residential properties that are to the north and to the west across Hockett Road, the closest houses, the closest dwellings to the proposed building are about 300 feet. And just the highlight of that proposed building is an estimated location of that building. A summary of the zoning as it applies to this application. The fire station is already permitted by right with the current zoning and proffers. The existing zoning district was approved in 1989 to regulate development of the West Creek Business Park, and the proffers are appropriate to regulate the development of that business park, including they address common property maintenance, architectural review, and do provide for significant setbacks. But those that zoning and those proffers would not be appropriate for a fire station. Approval of this application would remove those proffers from this site. As it relates to Hockett Road is identified as a major collector in the major thoroughfare plan with an ultimate right-of-way up to 70 feet. Importantly, with the major thoroughfare plan, it determined that Hockett Road for the foreseeable future would remain a 2-lane undivided roadway. The fire station does not generate sufficient traffic to require traffic impact analysis. And there are no access management concerns as it relates to the proximity of the proposed station site to Tucko Creek Parkway. Also, Hockett Road does have a posted speed limit of 55 miles per hour. A speed study may be requested after construction of the station, if approved, but there is no assurance that the speed limit will be reduced. Traffic studies have previously determined that a traffic signal is not warranted at the Hockett Road, Tucko Creek Parkway intersection. Signal warrant analysis may be conducted periodically, but again, there are no plans at this time to install a signal, roundabout, or similar traffic control at that intersection. As it relates more specifically to the site, ingress and egress to Hockett Road, sight lines, emergency signalization, preemptive signage, and other type of traffic control options will be reviewed and analyzed as a part of the engineering site design. And of course, VDOT will be engaged in that analysis. This information provided by the applicant that the station would be staffed by career personnel, volunteer participation would be encouraged, and there would be an ambulance assigned to the station. Just look at the conceptual plan, and the conceptual plan is proffered. This is a conceptual rendering. Just a note for the Planning Commission, this is an exhibit only. It is not proffered, but it does provide sort of a rendering of sort of the bird's eye view, the aerial photograph view of what this will look like. This application is consistent with a number of previous countywide planning approvals. That would include, it is consistent with the 2035 comprehensive plan, the public facilities plan that was adopted 2018, and with the bond referendum for public safety that was approved by the county voters in 2021. There was a community meeting held in January. There were approximately 43 attendees, including board members Mr. Peterson and Mr. Fodders and Planning Commissioner Mr. Patuck. There were a number of questions and concerns raised with this request, including the selection of this site as opposed to other sites, the potential volume of emergency calls, fire rescue staffing, the potential for office space for the sheriff, other potential uses for the site, traffic speeds and safety, and other related matters to Hockett Road, emergency signalization, noise from trucks and sirens, and just a number of items were discussed. And overall, several of the attendees expressed support, and several attendees expressed concerns with this application. The applicant is proposing 3 proffers. The first one would limit the use of the site to fire rescue station and government services. The second one would commit to that conceptual plan that I showed you earlier. And the last one deals with the architectural treatment of refuse containers. That concludes our presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Was there any consideration to locating the fire station any other place, like with an entrance over on Tucko Creek Parkway or something?
I mean, this site was acquired to locate the fire station. I think during the applicant's presentation, they may touch on other sites that were considered, and I would kind of defer to the applicant to discuss that.
Thank you. Applicant like to speak?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Ms. Jackson, Ms. Parker, I'm Vic Carpenter. I'm the County Administrator for Goochland County. Tonight, I'm here before you to ask your approval for our request for a rezoning of 5 acres of land on Hockett Road in order to build a fire station. Goochland County needs a fire station here to address issues related to growth in the eastern end of the county. A fire station built here will optimize our 911 response times. A new station additionally would be the first additional service area added since the 1950s or 60s to Goochland County. Building a station here would support the Board of Supervisors' strategic goal of providing high-quality public services. So why are we here asking? Well, it's important to start by stating that current zoning already allows a fire station to be built here by right. No rezoning is required to actually build a fire station. However, the property that we have is located in an existing zoning district, M1, that has proffers that were attached in 1989 when West Creek was developed. Those proffers, though appropriate for a business park, are not appropriate for a county-owned fire station. They include architectural review and control, financial contributions towards running the business park, and significant setbacks. By approving this rezoning, those proffers would be removed. So why are we wanting to place a fire station on this piece of property? Well, Chief Eddie Ferguson will review in better detail why we need this station and why we wish to place it here.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. I'm Eddie Ferguson, the Fire Chief for Goochland County Department of Fire Rescue and Emergency Services. Goochland County Department of Fire Rescue and Emergency Services currently has 6 fire station locations spread out through the county. We have Company 1 in Mannequin, Company 2 in Crozier, 3 in Centerville, 4 is in Fife, 5 is in the courthouse, and 6 is in the Haydensville area of the county. 5 of the 6 fire stations presently are owned by the Volunteer Association Incorporated. Station 6, built in 2017, is the only owned county fire station. Today's fire rescue services have many different challenges than we did years ago. We require modern fire stations to address the control of contamination throughout the building, as an example. As you may know, firefighters are more susceptible to cancer than the general U.S. population. Some of the ways that we're looking at the existing fire stations, Mr. Carpenter had indicated that most of the existing fire stations, there's 5 volunteer-owned fire stations, 4 of those were built back in the late 1950s, early 1960s. The Volunteer Association presently has an effort underfoot where they're renovating some of the buildings to try to incorporate some of the modern features that not only control the contamination I spoke of, but also accommodate 24-hour staff. Many of the stations built in that era of time and those original 6 footprints were only designed to garage apparatus with volunteer members responding from home, and now we have career personnel and volunteer members staying in the facility overnight. The county is looking at adding additional fire stations throughout the county. The West Creek Fire Station number 7 is the topic here tonight. We also are looking at Sandy Hook, and there are other places throughout the county that show up in our capital improvement plan. The call volume is increasing in the county, particularly in the eastern end, covered primarily by Company 1 in Mannequin and Company 3 in Centerville. But in particular, that northeastern corner of the county there at Centerville, we're seeing a big jump in call volume. If you look at some of the call volume that's shown there on the slide, in 2022, fire rescue answered 4,397 incidents. That was a 14% increase over 2021. But the year before, coming out of the pandemic, we saw a 22% increase. If you look at the response districts, Mannequin has increased to 679 responses, but 262 of those responses also required the assistance of other companies responding into the Mannequin district to handle those calls. The same thing is true in Centerville. Of the 1,115 responses there at Company 3, 383 of those required assistance from other companies coming in. Now that could have been because Company 1 or Company 3, or maybe both, were already on a call, because the chances of calls occurring simultaneously happens pretty frequently in that area of the county. Or it could have been the type of call that required more assistance, more staffing, more emergency responders on the fire ground. I think it's important to note that
fire stations can only handle typically one incident at a time. That incident could be any number of things. Companies 2, 4, 5, and 6, all to the central and the west of the eastern end, routinely move into the eastern end of the county to help cover those calls. But that also adds to the response times to get into those areas. And when those companies in the central areas of the county and western areas are moving east or any location out of their district, then that leaves those areas without adequate coverage. Let's see. There we go. The area is presently served by Company 1 in Mannequin and Company 3 in Centerville. It's a designated growth area per the comprehensive plan and includes Centerville Village and the West Creek Business Park. Includes Route 288, Interstate 64, Ashland Road, Broad Street Road, and Patterson Avenue, and other heavily traveled roadways. The eastern of the county, as we've already mentioned, is rapidly growing with residential, business, and also industrial. And this is partly, in fact, this is the area of economic growth and development in the county, and also supported by the Tuckahoe Creek Service District. Since 2017, we have noted that Company 1's calls have increased by 68%, and Company 3's calls have increased by 55%. And we had seen those numbers on the previous slide. When you look at the amount of growth and development that is either already occurred or is under construction or is under consideration for approval, these all impact the fire rescue's ability to be able to respond to calls in a timely manner and have enough resources to handle these calls. The eastern end, as we said, is rapidly growing. We use a predictive analytics to project future calls. For example, we look at per capita, the population, and the number of calls we have. There's some best logic, best practices, such as when you're looking at assisted living units, it's one call for every 3 units, and skilled nursing beds typically generate at least one call per year. When we looked at all this growth and development several years ago, it was about 3,500 residential units. And at that particular time, we estimated that it could generate an additional 1,000 fire rescue calls on top of what we are handling today. And we certainly seem to be on track to have that type of increase. I'll just point out some of the development that's listed on the slide. Shelter in Arms Hospital. We responded to Shelter in Arms Hospital almost 250 times in 2022 for patient transfers to other medical facilities and also fire alarms and other emergencies there at the site. We're certainly looking at an increase of calls there at Avery Point. Avery Point is a large assisted living retirement type community that also has a good number of skilled nursing beds associated with it when it's fully built out. And we're expecting, we estimated about 484 calls there based on the mixed number of different types of units there. And then we were learned from talking to folks in Baltimore that they pretty much see about 500 fire rescue responses to the Erickson project that's in Baltimore, Maryland. So I think our math is pretty close based on what we predicted. And then, of course, we're looking at all the growth and development that's occurring in the Centerville District, north of I-64, Project Rocky, and other industrial uses. The Hockett location that's been offered that we have selected from the developer, we believe will serve well on Hockett Road for the new West Creek Fire Station. It'll meet our needs to address the growth and demands of the future. Not only does it serve the business park, but it's on the periphery of the business park, which allows us to serve the communities. The explosive residential growth that has occurred there on Hockett Road with neighborhoods such as Reader's Branch and Mosaic and other ones that are on the consideration. The other thing I'll tell you is that the criteria for the fire station site optimizes response times for fire rescue personnel. It does build upon the 1, 3, and 5 mile response radiuses, north, south, east, and west road connectivity, and 5 to 8 acres is usually what we look for a fire station site, and this is 5 acres, so we think the right amount of property is there. It does minimize the one-way in and out connectivity and ability to support existing fire stations, and it does provide multiple routes for response, which we think will impact response times. It will also allow us to serve that area of West Creek in the northeastern corner of the county on Wilkes Ridge Parkway. All those businesses along Wilkes Ridge Parkway, the apartments, the medical office building, Shelter and Arms, the Residence Inn, and now Avery Point, that seems to be where the majority of the calls are increasing there in the West Creek Business Park. Goochland County Department of Fire Rescue and Emergency Services, we're an all-hazard fire rescue department. We address fire, EMS, hazardous materials, technical rescue, water rescue, and emergency management. The map here shows our existing 6 locations with 1, 3, and 5 mile drive distances around the radius of the stations. The county is large. It's almost 290 square miles. It's about 30 miles long. And we have interstate highways that connect it, James River to the south, as well as CSX railroad tracks. If you look at the locations of the present fire stations, you certainly will see that there are definitely some gaps throughout the county where we do need to look at additional fire stations in the future. But if you look at what's available today, and if you think about the majority of the calls occurring in the East End, it's a long distance for companies to travel from the West End or from the Central to the East End, and response times are definitely increased as a result of that. And additionally, as we have already said, those areas are left vacant without adequate emergency medical and fire resources when they have to move to address calls that are occurring in the Eastern End. The West Creek Fire Station will shore up coverage in the Eastern End, providing direct support to companies 1 and 3, those response districts. The station will be staffed with a fire engine and an ambulance, and it will be staffed by career personnel as well as volunteer personnel as often as available. Company 1 and 3 can only handle 1 incident at a time. You never know what that's going to be. It could be a head-on collision, it could be a heart attack, it could be a medical call, or it could be a structure fire, or it could be some type of call of low acuity. And we really don't know what that next call is going to be. It could be some of the same types of calls already mentioned. Minutes do matter. I had already mentioned that in 2022, we saw 4,397 fire and EMS calls, a record year of activity, fire department. About 75% of those calls were emergency medical services calls. And I don't think that's too much different than what you see in most fire rescue departments, and certainly those that are developing in localities that are becoming developed. I'll just say that minutes matter, and so do response times. Fires can double in size every 30 seconds. Today, you only have 3 to 4 minutes to get out of your home if it's on fire, compared to almost 17 minutes 30 years ago. And this is based on the materials and the furnishings that our homes are built of today. They burn much hotter, quicker, with more toxic smoke and so forth. Shortening EMS response times increases survival from sudden cardiac arrest. CPR plus the use of the AED or defibrillation increases survival rates as high as 49 to 75%. And brain damage can occur without oxygen in as little as 4 to 6 minutes. A person can bleed to death in 3 to 5 minutes. Looking at NFPA, National Fire Protection Association, the recommendations on how many personnel it takes to handle certain types of fire emergencies. If you look at that, a structure fire, if you're using an aerial device, may require as many as 15 personnel. An open air strip mall, 27 members. A garden apartment, 27 members. And a high-rise, 42 members. And certainly you may think that we don't have high-rises in Goochland, but the definition of a high-rise would be anything over 75 feet tall, any building over that height. And certainly we do have some buildings that are 6 and 7 stories as far as in West Creek, if you count the penthouse type rooftop. And I know there's a development on Ashland Road that's predicted that possibly the building could be as tall as 120 feet. It's a high-rise for the intents of what it would take to serve that building for emergencies. One thing NFPA leaves out is what if there's no water supply? If you don't have fire hydrants and you're in a rural area of the county, then we may have as many people handling rural water supply using tankers to shuttle water in as we do on the fire ground, affecting fire suppression. So having said that, I'll turn the presentation back over to County Administrator Mr. Carpenter for our next slide to finish up the presentation. I thank you for allowing me to present.
see. There it goes, Ms. Garvin. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Chief Ferguson. So I was asked earlier by Mr. Rocket Charlie about have we looked at other properties in selecting this one. And so let me tell you a little bit of the history of this property and Goochland County's involvement with it. Back in 2012, a property was offered to the county by West Creek Associates somewhere in this West Creek area. After several years of looking at as many as 5 sites, county staff in 2019 determined that this site was the preferred choice, and a public community meeting was held in 2019 regarding this site as that location. In 2022, the property was donated to Goochland County. In January of 2023, another community meeting was held about this site regarding this rezoning application that we're speaking about tonight. Goochland County understands the impacts of building a fire station in a neighborhood, and we understand that it has impacts on the citizens that live there. We commit to being a good neighbor, both in our design and our operational policies. We commit to regularly and do quality maintenance of these facilities. We will operate lights and sirens in strict accordance with state laws. We will do our best to ensure that routine functions that we conduct are done in a minimally intrusive fashion. And we will construct this facility to be dark sky compliant, as all other facilities are required to do in this county. So, where would we go from here? Well, if approval is secured, the funding for this facility has already been secured. So upon receiving the approvals, we will begin the design, the bidding, and the construction phases for the station. We would anticipate it would take between 18 to 24 months to build and complete this facility. Gentlemen, this is the culmination of a long process. It began with a comprehensive plan that was approved in 2015. It is consistent with that plan. Our application is consistent with the Public Facilities Plan that was adopted by the Board of Supervisors in 2018. Our application is consistent with the bond referendum for public safety that was approved by voters in 2021. What are we seeking? Goochland County is asking that these 5 acres be rezoned in order to remove the business park proffers. We will offer to strictly limit the use of the property to only a fire station or government use, and thereby prohibiting all the other uses that currently could be placed on this property. We will proffer conceptual plans, as we have shown, that will show how the property will be developed, and we will ensure the refuse container enclosures are attractive and compatible with designs to the building. Members of the Commission, in closing, I want to point out several things to you. Goochland County needs this facility. All our residents would benefit from the construction of it, the eastern part, the central part, and the western part of it as well. Response times across the county will be positively affected by this location because of its excellent access to the existing road structure that does not have to be built. We'll be the same good neighbor to our neighbors here that we have been at 6 other locations for the last 70 years. We will continue to implement the comp plan and the public facilities plan. So, are there any questions that we have tonight for myself or other members of staff?
None, thank you. Okay, we'll open it up to public hearing. Anybody who wants to speak, please come up, and you have 3 minutes, please.
Good evening. My name is Thomas Eichler. I live at 310 Piping Rock Road in Madison-Sabbett. I am a mostly retired physician and have lived in Kinloch Villa since April 2021, where my backyard faces Hockett Road. On behalf of my neighbors and the Kinloch Villas Working Group, I'd like to thank the Planning Commission for the opportunity to voice our concerns regarding the location of the proposed new fire station on the Hockett Road parcel. I think it's important that you know that we strongly support our first responders and recognize their critical role in our municipal infrastructure. My comments address the location of the aforementioned parcel and the process for site selection. After reviewing available county records, email chains, site selection reports, and the Goochland County Public Facilities Master Plan 2018-43, one recurring theme emerges. The county intentionally ignored their own criteria for locating new fire and rescue facilities. 3 parcels were made available by West Creek Associates with an analysis of these sites by the Timmons Group. Site number 1 is at the terminus of Tuckahoe Creek Parkway, adjacent to the defunct HCA Emergency Services Facility, with existing infrastructure and rapid access to 288 and no discernible residential impact. Site number 2 is on West Creek Parkway, between Branch Road and Sanctuary Trail, the so-called Hardywood site. This was, in fact, the preferred site in October 2016, as per County Principal Planner Tom Coleman. Again, no residential impact. Site number 3 is the parcel in question. The July 2018 Timmons report states that the site's proximity to existing and planned residential development does indeed raise concerns. At some point, site number 3 mysteriously became the preferred site, despite the fact that the county's master plan clearly stipulates that negative impacts to adjacent residential areas are to be avoided when constructing new facilities. My friends, the Kinloch development, including the villas, is arguably the crown jewel of Goochland County residential real estate, with hundreds of millions of dollars of investment. There is a body of literature that suggests that proximity to a fire station with the attendant noise, light, and fuel pollution has a substantially negative impact on resale values of existing homes. Insofar as the county willfully ignored their own published criteria for fire station location and the undeniable deleterious effect on property values, we respectfully request that the county please tap the brakes on this project and defer approval of the rezoning request until the site selection process can be reopened and re-explored in a truly transparent fashion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Steve Pearson, and I live in the Kinloch Villas and back up to Hockett Road. I'm working with many of my neighbors in the villas and beyond. I'm a partially retired attorney with a lot of experience in issues in this area and with Goochland County government, but in the past. We moved to the villas last spring. Our group wrote to you last week, so I hope that you're familiar with the lack of records and the turnover among the senior staff at the county that leaves us pretty much in the dark as to what has happened and how and why. I do want to shout out to the county administrator who's tried hard to help and has been candid about the information deficiencies, and also to the fire chief and the department, which protects us all in our short experience is staffed with conscientious, hardworking, and responsive staff. Our group supports them, albeit not this location. You'll hear from others, but what I want to raise for you is our views on the planning process and why it's run off the tracks, presenting all of us in the county with a poor result. I don't have time in my 3 minutes to do justice to the subject or to describe all of the steps, what we know and don't know, and the hows and the whens, but I think I can give you a reasonable picture of the why. Please take a look at my exhibit. It's got my name at the bottom and some yellow highlighting. At the top, you'll see the site selection criteria required by the comprehensive plan, which were not followed in this process. There was never any consideration given to the effect of the decision on our nearby residential development with aggregate investment well into the 8 figures. Nor were alternatives such as relocation and renovation of existing fire facilities considered. These are required by the comp plan, as you can see, but as best we can determine, they were ignored in favor of the criteria publicized at the 2 public meetings, which were held after the decision was made, and were held not to hear the views of the public, but rather to tell them about the decision. Also, undisclosed requirements, which you'll see at the bottom of the page, were added without the knowledge of the public, and that seriously constrained the availability of sites with requirements for location and other terms that were never made public. This seems to have been an ad hoc process with no transparency and no real effort to comply with county policy expressed in the comp plan. It's produced a result which can't be regarded as trustworthy by the citizens. There are literally no records, of meetings, phone calls, committee reports, recommendations, and even decisions, though they must have occurred. And we literally don't know who ultimately approved this decision or whether it was approved by anybody. As best we can tell, the matter's never been squarely before the Board of Supervisors for a vote. The result is not what we expect of a government that relies on citizen confidence and trust for its legitimacy. In the end, this is an arbitrary, capricious, unreasonable decision unsupported by a record of any facts, comprehensive review of needs and options, or an application of clear, agreed public rules of decision. We have a right to expect better from our county.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Pearson, can I get your address, please?
Sure, 302 Piping Rock.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. My name is David Acey. I live at 366 Swinburne Road in Kinloch Villas. I'm a resident of Kinloch Villas, the community most impacted by the Hockett Road site location. Kinloch Villas is the newest addition to the Kinloch Property Owners Association, a collection of prestigious neighborhoods representing some of the most expensive homes in the county. I would like to reiterate what Dr. Eichler and Mr. Pearson discussed about the master plan's locational criteria. It says, locate fire stations to minimize negative impact to surrounding neighbors and developments. When our two other local fire and rescue stations were established, their planned locations did not impact surrounding neighbors and developments. Furthermore, their locations do not have sightline concerns for oncoming traffic. The proposed site of Hockett Road does. So the question is, why did the county deviate from the guidelines spelled out in the master plan's locational criteria, last updated February 2018? Now let me focus on how this infraction of the following guidelines, by not following the guidelines, will impact the residents in Kinloch Villas. Close proximity to a fire station cannot be changed after it's built close to your home. If that concerns you, it might also concern future buyers if and when you decide to sell. Even if the fire station staff tells you they don't turn on sirens right away, there's no guarantee that will be adhered, especially with the busy and growing traffic on Hockett Road. The daily operations of a fire station on Hockett Road would create much higher noise versus the two other proposed site locations, cause discomfort for our residents and others in the surrounding area. Additionally, the proposed fire station would be occupied 24 hours a day, and most of the noise-generating activities would occur during the day. The fire station's bright lights from dusk to dawn also will be a constant annoyance as you look out windows or while relaxing on a patio or screened porch. There will also be piercing lights aimed directly at homes in the Kinloch Villas from trucks leaving the fire station at night. And finally, homeowners could end up with a poorly appreciated or depreciated home just because of its proximity to the fire station. Our working group would support either one of the two other sites presented in the 2018 Timmons Group preliminary analysis. We trust you will consider our concerns and not recommend the Hockett Road site location. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Mark Kinney. I live on 317 Piping Rock Road. So these fellows are my neighbors. First of all, I want to, what Tom said, we all appreciate the fire department here. The reason I say that is because some people think we're against the fire department. It's just the actual place that they're going to place this. In the meeting, I'd never been to a meeting like that, where it was held January 30th, that type of meeting, and that was held to kind of explain some of this. And one of the things that kind of struck me was that there was a constant push on this Timmons Group assessment that was done as some sort of, a reasoning to put the fire station in that spot. And then it took a lot of work to get the actual report. And then when you read the report, that's actually what it said. So I felt a little bit like, for the lack of a better term, misled on that. I will say that it's very much of a concern for the sound, the noise, and I asked, because the fire station's so close to the road at that meeting, was there any way we could push it way back a little bit on the land? And we were told no. So I again think that I would like for y'all to, or think about the other sites. And lastly, it's pretty dramatic, but if we're in our backyards for barbecue, a fairly decent baseball player could throw a baseball and hit a fire truck over there. That is very close to where we are, and you saw it on the map. It's right in our backyard. So I appreciate your time, and I would appreciate you to defer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Susan Pember, and I live at 345 Swinburne Road in Kenlock Villas. I'm going to speak specifically about response time. I'm losing my voice a little bit, excuse me. I had multiple calls between August and December concerning the illnesses and things that were happening to my husband. And I have to tell you that each time we were very surprised at the rapid response, obviously delighted. I had very little time to gather a purse, to get our wallet, get things together, a jacket, etc. And that really surprised me considering where we lived. The responding crews were from different locations. They didn't always come from the same location. So I want to just say that not only was I very grateful for their kindness and obviously their professionalism, but also very grateful for their rapid responses every time. I do oppose the current site, but I'm grateful for what they've done. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Barclay Zimmerman. I live at 300 Piping Rock Road in the Villas. And my wife and I moved here from the city of Richmond. We're very happy to be out of that and in here. We do have some concerns. We moved here just a year ago, and the site of this proposed fire station is the question in our minds. I'm a retired surgeon. My wife is a retired nurse. We're both very much in favor of medical facilities and emergency facilities, so there's no argument there. The argument, as I see it, or as we see it, is that the location, proposed location of this fire station is extremely close to the yards in our neighborhood. And I can't imagine it's not going to produce some discomfort, considerable discomfort in the middle of the night when the fire whistles go off. There were two other very acceptable, seemingly acceptable locations for this station, and we all, as you heard, wish you would give reconsideration to those sites before making any final decisions on this. We're not proposing that you do away with the station, just to reconsider its location. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Heidi Benson. I live at 302 Piping Rock Road. My backyard is going to be directly across from the proposed location of this fire station. I also just moved there. I haven't even lived there a year yet. I lived in the city of Richmond for 27 years. I have 3 grown daughters. They all kind of laughed at me and said, "Mom, oh my gosh, you're moving to the country. You're moving out into the sticks." And I said, "Yes, I'm so excited. I can't wait." I really was so excited to live in Kinloch Villas. I looked at properties in Chesterfield, Midlothian, Hanover, Ashland, and I decided that Goochland was the place for me, Kinloch Villas was the place for me. I built a house that I absolutely love. I come home from work every day, so happy to be there. I understand that there's need, because you can see every day, you can see all the new buildings that are going up. I understand the need for the new fire department, the new firehouse. I just don't think it needs to be in that location. There are so many empty pieces of land very close to there that wouldn't affect our neighborhood. So I would really like somebody to make a decision that this is put on hold and other locations are looked at. I think it would be great. Why bother the people, or why disappoint the residents who are there in these beautiful homes if there is another option? The other thing I wanted to say too is the traffic on Hockett Road is nuts. I go to work every morning. I have to be at work at 7:30. At 7:15 when I leave my house, traffic is zooming 55 miles an hour up and down Hockett Road. For me to cross Hockett Road sometimes is like taking my life in my hands a little bit. There is a weird curve in the road that makes it very difficult to see cars that are coming from the Broad Street side, so coming south on Hockett Road. It's very hard to see them with that curve. When I come home from work, I leave work at 4, I get home about 4:15, it's the same. It's still cars going back and forth. This time I'm coming from the opposite direction. And you have to be extremely careful. I couldn't imagine being in a big fire truck or an ambulance trying to pull out when in traffic that's going that fast. So I am very opposed to the location of this firehouse, not opposed to a firehouse, but I really hope somebody takes into consideration my feelings, all my neighbors' feelings, and perhaps makes a different decision on this location. Thanks.
Thank you.
Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Robert Warwick. My address is 367 Swinburne Road, Kinloch Villas. In the first decade of this century, I spent several years as a volunteer ambulance driver, normally operating from the Centerville station. One of the things I learned early on is the importance of minimizing response times. If you take too long to get to the patient you may be unable to help him. He may be dead. With my experiences on the medical emergency side, it is not difficult to envision the effect of a longer response time when the emergency is a fire. And closely related to the emergency response time is the availability of units to respond. When I was a driver, I can recall many occasions when my ambulance had to go to the far end of the county to respond to a call because there were simply no other units available. This, of course, increases response time and may adversely affect the ability to provide timely assistance. Of course, things have changed in the intervening years. We now have all stations manned around the clock with full-time career providers. But the county has the same number of stations, 6, that we had in 20 years ago when I was running, to serve a population that has been, is, and will continue to expand substantially, with the bulk of the expansion in the East End, including the community where I live now, including Avery Point, including Mosaic. And these communities didn't exist when I was running. The increasing population puts increased strain on response times, even with the present stations manned 24/7. We need the new station, and we need it sooner rather than later. Selected site has been acquired, but even with prompt action by this commission and approval by the Board of Supervisors to revise the zoning, it's going to take a year or more to get the new station in operation. Sending the site selection back to the acquisition back to the drawing board just delays this much further, and I think that's unnecessary. So I'm asking you to move this matter to the Board of Supervisors tonight with a recommendation that the zoning change be approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Sandra Warwick, 367 Swinburne Road, Kinloch Villas. I would like to make a point about the proximity of fire rescue stations to high-end homes. Henrico County, whose land area is actually slightly smaller than that of Goochland, has 22 fire stations. We have 6. There are at least 2, one on Kane Road that is in a neighborhood and literally surrounded by homes that range from the high 6 to 7 figures. There is another one on the corner of Gaskins Road and River Road, and that location does not seem to have had any effect on people building million-dollar homes close to them. I fully support this rezoning application. I will be hearing the engines when it is built, and I urge you to recommend approval of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we will close the public hearing. Applicant, would you like to come up, please?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Goshen County is very appreciative of its citizens, and we're very aware of the impact that any facility such as this, wherever it's located, is going to have. There is, in reality, no place we could put it that it won't have impact on someone somewhere. We're very also, the conversation dialogue we've had with these citizens has been very positive and open. They've been very strong in their support for what we do as public servants. I truly appreciate that. But I would like to address some of their concerns for you. One of the stated concerns is the request that we reconsider this location, look at some of the others that were out there. At one time, from what we can tell, there are at least 5 different locations that were looked at across the eastern part of the county. As time went on, those were narrowed, and as they referred, there were 3 of them, one close to the HCA, one down what they call the Hardywood side in this facility. Those other 2 locations were ruled out, it appears, in part because, as the chief has pointed out, our calls for service have shifted north. At one point, we thought the growth in the calls would be more to the south on the Patterson Avenue area. That's no longer the case. So a facility on that end no longer served our needs. Facility at the facility at the HCA side is right on the border with Henrico County. And as the chief showed, that 5-mile circle is critical. When you take half the circle and cut it off, you've lost half your ability to provide services to your citizen. So it was not an optimally sited facility or location. I think it's also important to point out that the location that we are looking at has been donated to the county by the associates, by West Creek Associates. They were aware of the other locations, but this is the site that they chose to donate to us as well. Other sites had greater commercial opportunity for them, just to be honest, and so they felt it was in their interest not to donate those sites to us. So trying to be good stewards of the citizens' resources, a donated site certainly is something we had to consider, that aspect to it as well. When we talk about deferring to another day, again, we're very cognizant of the fact that these citizens have moved into their homes, beautiful homes, and they're great additions to our county all within the last year or so. We've been talking about this site since 2019, we know. In 2021, we had a referendum that the public voted on. This site was clearly indicated in that site. If Goshen County had to stop every time we have new development come in and start it over again to reconsider, we would never have any ability to respond to the growth in the community. At some point, you have to decide to go forward with what you know. And we made these decisions. This community was not there. So you can't say that we didn't consider the impact because there was not an impact in 2019 to be considered. We understand that they, again, do live there now, and our commitment has been and will be to be great neighbors and stewards of their community as well for them. So we believe that these are issues that we did take into consideration. We are aware of the impact it's going to have, but this is a site that has been vetted. It has gone through staff processes for many years. This is the best location we can find that the donors were willing to give to us. And we ask, therefore, members of this commission, that you do consider our request and you vote approval to send to the Board of Supervisors. I'll take any questions if you have them.
Is there any way that can be screened where they don't have to look right at it from their backyards?
Well, I mean, the whole design still has to be done. So that's certainly something that we'd be willing to look at. Obviously, the trucks have to drive onto the street at some point, so they'll have to be pointed out towards it. But that's something that we'll definitely be glad to take into consideration if we can design the site in a way that would minimize impact to our neighbors, and we'd be glad to. Yes, sir.
And this, you said this came about in 2019, so that the public has been aware that this site was chosen for a firehouse.
To the best of my knowledge, everyone who was here, yes, sir. We tried as well as we could.
Thank
you. Yes, sir.
In Goochland, we have a lighting ordinance that is called dark sky, so all light goes down. So there were some comments made about lights shining in directly into their backyard. There are going to be no projected lights out to the street or?
No, sir. We're required to, again, dark sky compliant lights, and you can go by some of our ball fields now that have similar lights, and the light pollution that escapes the property is so minimal. And so nothing will be pointed at them. I think one of the gentlemen did indicate is the headlights would be pointed towards them. And of course, we will, to the best that we can, we'd certainly minimize the access to the road, but the road will still have to be accessed at some point. But as far as floodlights and those kinds, those would definitely be dark sky compliant. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I got two questions. One is regarding when this was cited. When you go to build or buy a house, you always supposedly do your due diligence to see what's going in the community. So you're saying that this firehouse location that showed up on county planning maps 19, 20, 21?
No, sir, we wouldn't have been on the plats because we didn't know the land at that point. But we had identified that, and we had received indications from West Creek Associates that this would be acceptable to them and they would donate the land to us. So discussions were held.
How
Yes,
would
sir.
a citizen wanting to buy in Kinloch Villas know it's a firehouse going there last year?
Well, our first public meeting was in 2019 with the residents. When we do those, we do our best to make sure that realtors, developers, the entire community knows it. Again, when the bond referendum was held in 2021, there were public meetings, there were public hearings throughout the whole county that talked about this as a site and a location as well. So though we didn't indicate all the public hearings we held on the bond referendum, each time we did that, this site was discussed, and that was in 2021. Again, at some point in time, the county has done what we are reasonably able to do to communicate these kinds of decisions. And so there was numerous opportunities through the years where the county shared this information with the public and let them know what our intentions and plans were.
And there's no site further down Hockett Road, north, away from Kinloch Villas, that would be available. I mean, we've got a greenhouse we just approved down there last year or so.
Yes.
There's nothing further north.
Nothing to my knowledge in the records we have that was considered or certainly that was offered to us for donation. Yes, sir.
And this is the only firehouse in this end that will dump out onto a two-lane road, because I know Centerville and Mannequin are on four-lane divided highways.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
I've got some comments.
Yes, please.
On occasion, if I'm heading from the west of the state, I live in the southwest corner of the county. To come from Charlottesville way, I'll cut through Haydensville to go to our residence, and I'll drive by the Company 6 firehouse that's owned. It's the first county-owned property, county-owned fire station, and it is lit at night, but it is very tasteful. It's probably one of the most tasteful lit buildings in that area of the county. My other comment is a story. Last January, I was dropping a friend off traveling on Hermitage Road, right around Gaines Thrifty area, and the guy I was traveling with, we heard a terrible noise from Gaines Thrifty, hopped in the car, and we came upon 4 young teenage boys that wrecked their car, flipped their car on Hermitage Road, right, pretty much at Gaines Thrifty. 2 of them were ejected, 2 of them were still in the car, and I called 911. The neighbor ran down from the bank, and when you see something like that, I've got 3 boys of my own, one that's getting ready to get a learner's permit. It kind of shakes you up a little bit because you're thinking, all right, these aren't any of my kids. Are they anybody, family members or anybody that I know? So you're thinking the worst. Fortunately, all 4 kids are fine, but the response time, it was great from the county, but it seemed like it took forever. And in this case, I would say that if this station were here, the response time would have been significantly better to that location, noting the proximity to Company 1 and Centerville being Mannequin. So I would see it being a benefit to the county, even being here.
I'd be the first to admit that I don't know that I want to live next to a fire station.
I agree.
But when I need it, I want them right next door.
I agree.
So I'd have to make a motion to approve it as.
Motion put forth.
I will second it.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Roll call vote for clarification, Mr. Duke?
Aye.
Mr. Rockacharlie?
Aye.
Mr. Patak?
Aye.
Mr. Brewer?
Aye.
The motion to recommend approval passes on a 4-0 vote. This case will be heard before the Board of Supervisors on April 18th, 2023, with a recommendation of approval from the Planning Commission.
Madam Secretary, any old business?
We have no old business. We do have one item of other business. Staff is going to be giving village plans update.
Good evening, Commissioners. Crystal Anitis, Deputy County Administrator. This evening, I wanted to share with you all as a body our path forward for our small area planning efforts, as this has been an ongoing priority for our designated growth areas in the Centerville and Courthouse Village areas. For this path forward, Goochland County has contracted with Timmons Group, a local firm based in Richmond, for a fresh perspective on our plans for the Courthouse and Centerville villages. Timmons Group will be reviewing all previous community and stakeholder input to build upon the work done to date. A central goal of Goochland and Timmons Group with this effort is to ensure that community input and feedback obtained to date is prominently highlighted given the common themes expressed that we have heard and received online thus far. Timmons has extensive experience with land use and planning given their work with regional planning organizations and economic development departments within the greater Richmond region. Additionally, Timmons Group has a long-standing working relationship with Goochland County, including various projects such as Fire Station 6 and the animal shelter. Through this review process, Timmons will propose a framework for the plans that will focus on regulating principles that will identify appropriate development zones while balancing the unique character of each village and highlighting preservation. Once complete, the plans will include a guide for future land use decisions to allow for flexibility of development with acceptable guidelines, which will also serve a core function and need for staff, as well as our community when they come forward with applications, which I think is critical at this point. We deal with a lot of one-offs that are not inherently consistent with the comp plan. Through Goochland County, along with Timmons, will schedule meetings to provide a project update to the community. They will also be presenting to you all, as well as the Board of Supervisors, in future meetings. Once completed, the Planning Commission, you all as a body, and the Board of Supervisors will consider these plans for adoption, and public hearings will be held for them. Our target for this is late spring. For more information, you can contact our planning department staff or go online. Happy to answer any questions that you all have.
All good?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn meeting?
So moved.
Seconded?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.